for joining us today. Thank you. I will share my screen. I understand that it's on the way. Yeah, there we go. I will have my time, but if Andrea, if you have to intervene, please go ahead. Well, first, thank you for the invite to the Budapest Open Access Initiative. As the introduction said, Barbara Rivera López, I'm the community manager of the Barcelona Declaration on Open Research Information. I will apologize because my slides are in English, but I will speak in Spanish. So it could be a little confusing, but I will make sure that please bear with me with the translation. Thank you so much for the interpretation as well. I would like to do a disclaimer to start. I will tell you about an experience that I had in Chile. I'm not speaking on behalf of the agency. I will talk about my experience, but I cannot talk about what the agency is doing right now. It is interesting to how it was lived from there under a lens of public policy. And I handle when I was on that environment. This was established in 1988, and it's an annual grant that supports the journals that are edited in Chile. And we have several years, and from throughout those years, something has happened. There was an assignment where people presented their reports, and then they were requesting for the funds. But in 2022, that became competitive. And they presented a project that was based on proposals. The agency was thinking that it was a good idea to compete for the funding. And then in 2016, there was a change to subsidize the printing and an idea far from digital, but only focused on digital journals. And with these competitive statements, there was an approach to institutions. So, like in magazines and the publishers from. So, the benefit of the project was to everyone. And in this 2016, there were some funding. So to fund those journals that were not charging for the access, and also priorities, for example, that the projects that the journals integrated open licenses and gender parity, and also territoriality. So how the journal was responding to the geographical environment where it was being edited. So that made the fund. We were focusing on the magazines, and there we had institutional portals, and it was focused on a model. And that's another issue. And the government policy was being found with people or meeting with people and with the communities. And that's what I can tell you from the government standpoint, but from the Barcelona Declaration as well. We see the focus on the scientific journals, especially metadata. And there are some presenters here that are part of this, and we focused precisely on the journal article and book metadata that it has some people from Latin America as well. And we did a framework for essential metadata. We have the joint task force with OA 2020, and there's also a Latin American focus where Andrea, Judith, and Madame from Glaxo were present on those meetings so that if we're going to talk about journals, we also have to use this is super fast because running out of time, and that gives us visibility and interoperability, and that makes us aligned to bear certain transparency standards. And also, this gives us access to accessibility and inclusion, and that gives us greater visibility, and so that people can keep the data and not just about the index. So to summarize, how do I see this? How we can support from the government, from the state, instead of doing something annually, multiple things, people from different standpoints, to acknowledge the structures, not projects, and also to link the funding with the open science indicators. I don't have any more time, but there's a little bit of more information, and I will share the slides with you. But that's it. That was as fast as I could do. So you could comment on this.
Muchísimas gracias, Bárbara. Gracias, demasiada
Thank you,
información.
Barbara. A lot of information for just 5 minutes.
Exactamente. Y preguntas,
And
aprovecho para
room for
comentar si
questions.
tuvieran
And I would like to
uso
comment,
la
were
caja de
you
Q&A para hacer
were you
cualquier
able to do
comentario o
the
pregunta
Q&A
a
boxes
nuestras panelistas
to
del día de
see if
hoy?
you can ask
Bueno, muy bien.
questions
Y
for our
ahora
panelists
tenemos
of the
a la
day?
doctora
So we
Silvia
have now
Arguello,
Dr. Silvia
quien también
Arguello,
viene
who's also
desde
with
Costa
us
Rica
from
y que nos va
Costa
a dar un
Rica,
panorama
and
también
who will
sobre
give
cómo
us
están apoyando estas
an
científicas.
overview.
Sabemos que Centroamérica y el Caribe
We
en
know that Central
particular y
America
Costa
and the
Rica ha
Caribbean, with
dado
scientific
pasos
journals, and
agigantados
Costa Rica in particular,
y ellos
have
nos están poniendo
taken
el ejemplo
gigantic
del
steps
apoyo a Costa
moving
Rica
forward. They are
a
setting the
estas
example
científicas
in the support
comerciales
to
sin ningún
non-commercial
interés,
scientific
llamémoslo,
journals,
¿sabes?
or without
Bueno, y para
charge or
contarnos
fee.
sobre esto, pues le damos
There
la
goes the
palabra a la
diamond
doctora
again.
Silvia.
But
Muchísimas
then we
gracias,
would like to
doctora.
give the floor to Dr. Silvia. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for the invitation, and I want to take this opportunity to give you greetings from the rector, Dr. Jorge Murillo, who couldn't be here because of agenda. I would like to comment on the experience of the National University of Costa Rica on the design of an establishment and protection model for non-commercial science journals. Maybe for those of you who don't know our institution, it's a small institution and infrastructure, but creating knowledge and what's none. We have 8 campuses around the country, and we have 27 academic journals, and that also gives us open access to the produced products from the university. For us, it's extremely important to have the scientific journals that enable us to share knowledge that it's generated within our institution, but also with other institutions as within our country, as others outside of our country, and what's most important, without a fee. But it also allows us to people from outside of the country gets to know us and how we work and what kind of products we're giving to the Costa Rican society and beyond our countries. And also, those magazines are an important mechanism for our science to circulate. Why is it important that we have developed this journal management system? Because we consider that the journals have an extremely important role, as it was mentioned on the previous slide. It also enables us to organize our institution and with this to care for the adequate resource management as for infrastructure, funding, and human resource in our institution, and also to determine what are the responsible stances of the publishing processes of the journals. Our management models for the sustainability of open access journals promotes the editorial quality, but also open science, that it's a fundamental pillar that it's pushing from the university and that recently was approved an open science policy within our institution, and extremely important for us the student inclusion, and you will see this throughout my presentation because and you see how this is important for us. And under the Latin American context, we also want to highlight that beyond this adoption of the open access usage within the institution, also the normalization and legitimization of the editorial person, their role as editors with an academic profile and with a paid work time. And this has been key in the process in the model that we have installed in the university. And we have created regulations, non-rigid regulations that enable us to back up and protect and officialize and give sustainability to this model. How do we create the model? It was a completely participation. It was a complete participative option done with the editorial person who are the center of all of this. The work with international specialists and other stakeholders in the university, for example, with the technological transfer offices and others that have to do with the support provided to the editors and the study of other usages and experiences on the topic. So here are some links to the document in case that you want to access that. In the ecosystem for our magazines and journals and for our editorial production in the National University, we see that we have on the upper part the scientific journals that could be adhered to school, an institute, a faculty, or even a rector office. We have, for example, a magazine. And also, we have two important access to give to advise the journals as the vice rector's office from research and the technology department and other departments that collaborate with the edit of the journals, like the public press and publishing programs, which we have a great deal of support from, and the procurement department, as I was saying, that they have also the Office of Technological Transfer, and that let us identify what kind of departments and stances involved in the system and to determine what are the competencies and responsibilities of each and to make a better use of institutional resource. On the model, under the regulations that is strengthening our model, what is established is that all the journals have to practice open access without looking for money. So they should be that they should have payment somehow for this. So what is it that we're doing with the editors? That depends on the stance where they are adhered to. But in general, in average, half part-time or it's devoted to this and extremely important. The guidelines allows us to establish the resource allocation and how we manage to have our institutional journals not to charge per the publication. So we have the editing journals, journeys or weeks. We also have budget to hire student aides. That is extremely important right now because they also present an institutional relay and knowledge in case that the editor is no longer with the institution or has to leave for some reason. Also, time for the portal administration. Also, time for the academic advisors in the case like Andrea Mora, who leads this whole open science and journals in the National University. Also, the metadata translation, the memberships, the constant training. How do we work? When we have a new journal, there is a registration on the CRIS system that will lead to other projects and initiatives within the institution. And in the magazine, we work with an action plan to 6 years, and that they are aligned, of course, to our open science strategies and other strategies from the national universities in Central America and Caribbean to open commercial open access. So they adhere to the system that it's evaluated at the beginning. They also open up the journal, and throughout the execution, there is a follow-up, a monitoring and evaluation that allow us to measure how the journal is working. And that also enables us to be able to generate certain resources or support for those mega journals that during this follow-up that could need it, and in which areas do they need the support. And the most important access of this from this model is that it allows us that the publishing of science is sustainable without investing in great amounts to third parties. It includes a new aspect that it's the hiring the students from different careers. For example, graphic designers that bring in so much with their knowledge, as I was saying. They help us keep a pool of information, and also to have guidelines and regulations associated to the model also lets us transcend the administrations, not just have steps back on these great breakthroughs that we have had. I would like just to acknowledge the great work that Andrea Mora has been doing from the research department for the great vision that they have had supporting Andrea's work and the editors as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Silvia. I join these congratulations for Andrea and for the rector, of course, also to you, but also for the solid efforts that the university has done and how they are becoming as a reference, not only for Costa Rica, but for Latin America. So congratulations, because it's not easy to make these journals part of the infrastructure of an institution, but this acknowledgement on sustainability, on economical investment, and in the policies, because all of this is maintains the structurally this knowledge infrastructure. So it's a worthy reference for all the universities who are in the process of full adoption of this open access philosophy, and that you're not afraid to the non-commercial open access, and that is not an issue. It can be maintained and sustained and can become a reality, right? Beyond an utopic scenario, because right now you're setting a clear example on how university can be an example of science as a public asset and non-commercial asset. Thank you so much, Sylvia, and to the whole team at the university. So we're going to give the floor to Lucia da Silveira. Thank you, Lucia, for being here. Uh, Now, from your vision as a librarian that don't charge the authors or the editors.
Tienes tu micrófono cerrado, me parece, Lucía.
I think you're on mute, Lucia. We can't hear you.
Ahora, ahora sí.
Ya. Sí, sí, gracias.
Can you hear me?
¿Y la pantalla está compartida?
And can you see my screen? Yes, yes, we can see it.
Vale, então vou por aí.
Okay.
Então, boa tarde, muito obrigada pelo convite, é uma honra estar aqui. Muito obrigada, Andrea.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Andrea. I will be sharing a little bit about the experience of the journalists portal from the UFSC to speak about the quality. And here are some of the data. We are 45 presenters. Some of them are native. We received over 4,000 publications per year, and 30% are accepted. We also have the experience on like the National University of Costa Rica. We have a consulting council and deliberative council that is responsible to make the greatest decisions from the university, and that they are the people that have a representation in the university in technology areas and information, labs, journals, postgraduate. But we also have representation from the editorial section. We have a technical team that has 3 librarians and an administrator, and each has a specific activity based on their working profile. So these are the management instruments, and we can do the mapping of the processes as a shared file so that other people from the team can continue without exclusively depending on one single team member. So all the services that are provided within our portal with our collaborators and the whole team, they know. So we work here also within a ticket system or a call system, and that system, it's in charge of information management. For example, if there's someone on vacation, and if I'm on vacation, my team knows exactly what to do in my absence, and everybody can have access to my calls or files. So this is a possibility so that we can support each other and to care if needed or improve our services as well. So these are our pillars, and here we have another map to identify where things are in our portal so that the professor can see all the activities and not exclusively, not just scientific editing issues. We have the green part that refers to the portal of journals. On the yellow portion, it has to do with the editorial team, and another of the activities, it's exclusive of the scientific editor. And with this little map, you can perceive a little bit better that integration between the teams. Some of our services are from migrating data, are hosting data from a magazine or a different platform that wants or would like to be on our portal. There's continuous education. Uh, there's advising about indexing. We also support the fostering investments so that the journals can have certain fostering agencies. We do technical aid. We know that it's important the past few months that we have undergone some ransomware attacks. So it's important to have this service so that the editors don't worry for the infrastructure as much, but to focus on validating the scientific journals content. We also have the structural revision of all the articles. So every article in the portal are just published through the revision and the metadata revision. And we also offer a persistent identification. I will present also the latest resolutions that we have implemented, that it's a norm from the university that has the editorial responsibility, so within the professor's responsibilities. So this year, after almost 50 years of the creation of the university, we just have the formalization of the editorial tasks of the university. So today, the professor could spend up to 20 hours a week with that responsibility, and they can also have 5 hours per week. Another solution that could be part of the infrastructure of the portal are the criteria for our admission, permanence, and discontinuity of journal. Many times we have talked about creating journals, and we have criteria for this. So we have deepened on those details, but we have discussed very little about the lack of continuity of those magazines. So our policies, you can see that they are available, but here are certain things: the responsibility of the university of being the one that promotes scientific publications, and also taking care of when to remove a publication from the portal. So why the university must be the responsible party of the scientific publishing, and to bring this responsibility, because in Brazil, 95% of the publications and their scientific research come from public universities. So the university is in charge of transferring that responsibility to other institutions. It can also take on that role as long as they continue to invest on that. I would also like to talk about the requirements for lack of continuity. For example, when do we remove them? When they are not compliant with the permanence requisites, when there's lack of communication, when we did all types of communications and was not effective, if there are issues with data, if there is a lack of indexing on the database, issues with evaluations, peer evaluation, that it's not being registered on the system. So when there's issues on why to take down a journal, we need to think about this, because we owe that respect to our community, because we have an audience, we have we have an author also who's waiting for the answer from an editorial team, and it's the name of the university and the credibility of the university who is being placed in an uncomfortable position. So those policies have come to help us strengthen. And with this, I have three other solutions that, for example, with the regulation to change the author's name in case of gender identity, where they have changed their name, because sometimes the scientific journals are indexed differently, and none of the indexators had regularized this variable. So we created a way to negotiate a process to have that process made visible, because, for example, in Brazil we have a legislation that enables changing your name very easily, but not on the scientific world. This is not available. So what we implemented was that we did that template, file template for scientific articles. In the case of the article template, what we have is the description of the tables, of the general descriptions, so that people that need some sort of reading resource of the digital file, that the content would be available for them from the moment where the article is published, not afterwards doing certain specialized treatment on the information. It's necessary that that article, it's born from an accessible standpoint. And another element that has been implemented, because the article circulates freely online. Before, the journals were published and there was certain limitation for that circulation, but the articles are arriving fast, which is great, but we don't have that editorial control, and we have to consider that within our article to leave the origin of the research, if it was published previously somewhere else, or if there's a contribution on the authorship, when did it happen, and if there was certain funding to do it, what kind of funding was there available, the number of ID, consent of use of the images, if the investigation or the research has certain kind of conflict of interest, the data could be available, and where is it available, if they're just in text or if they are under a trustworthy repository. What are the links to have access to these licenses for usage for our journals in the university? They are licensed with the GD Commons. And we also say that the university is responsible for the publishing, but not the expressed ideas inside of the article. That is a responsibility of each of the authors. Who are the editors that participated? What is the history or the background of the registration of this document? And that's how we avoid creating other 5 documents that an author would need to sign. So we optimize the time of the editorial team and of the authors. We have here is everything very specific. Here are some obstacles or challenges that we face in terms of billable hours. The fact of having a specialized team, multidisciplinary team that it's broader and needs more people that know about diagram design. It's sometimes difficult for us to keep, for example, today's. We don't have the resources for the implementing of the XML.
Or
some changes that have been happening because of AI who are impacting our lives. And we don't have a lot of certainty on where we're going
Muchísimas
to
gracias,
take all
Luciana.
of this. So
Gracias
I
por
am
la
at your service.
presentación. Ahora, si me permiten, voy a ir un poquito más rápido para que no nos
Okay, right
comamos
now
tanto
I
tiempo.
will move
Me voy a
forward a
presentar
little speed
Paola
up. So
de
I'll just
Giovanni,
introduce
compañera,
Paola
¿cómo
de
estás? Qué gusto
Giovanni. Hi,
verte.
Paola. How are you? It's good to
Nos
see
va a
you.
hablar un poco desde el punto de vista,
And
pues,
she will
como
be
autora,
sharing
como
from
investigadora de
the
Rectors.
author, researcher
Gracias
standpoint, and
por
also as an
que todos hemos
expert
traído
for
a
open
Paola.
access. So we
Entonces,
have
por
already
el caso de
Paola. So in
Argentina,
the case of
¿qué nos puedes
Argentina,
compartir?
what can you
Muchas
share
gracias.
with us? Thank you, Paola.
Bueno, es un honor estar acá,
Thank you.
les
It's an
agradezco
honor
mucho la
to be
invitación.
here. I
Ahora
thank you
quisiera
for the
compartirles un
invitation, and I
video
would
que
like to
armamos en
share
el
a
equipo.
video that
Nosotros
we put
seguimos
together with the
utilizando
team. We continue to use
la denominación diamante, pero
the diamond
para
denomination,
separar de lo que es
but to
comercial, y
separate
nos
to
parece
what's
interesante su propuesta,
commercial,
Arianna. Así
we
que bueno, les
find
comparto
it
el video y después
interesting
algunas palabras.
how certain
Ay, no se escucha.
No se escucha, quizá le
we
puedes
cannot
subir el
hear it.
volumen a
Maybe you
a tu video
can
y dejar abierto tu micrófono, quizá. Si
leave your
desea.
mic open
Lo
and
está reproduciendo.
Alguien más, ya.
Sí.
Voy. Gracias, André.
thank you, Andrea.
Bueno, mientras tanto decirles que estaba
In the
escuchando
meantime, I was
atentamente a
listening
hablar
closely to
a
those who
Lucía, porque
have
digo,
been
tenemos tanto en común y muchas cosas
talking to
para
Lucia, and we have
aprender
so much in
de
common
estas experiencias.
to learn from
Nuestro
these
portal y
experiences. Our
trabajo
portal and our
surgió porque
work
en mi
came
caso yo
up
venía
because, in
trabajando
my
con
case, I
registros de
have been working with
publicaciones.
a
Entonces,
publishing
los editores
repository.
de revistas venían
So
a
the
preguntar cómo podemos hacer
journal
esto, cómo
editors
podemos
were
hacer lo
reaching
otro.
out, how can we
Y
do
una vez que
this or
tuvimos una
that? And
política
once we
de
had
docencia abierta en la
open
universidad,
science policies on
hicimos
the
en el año
university, we
2018
did in 2018
un focus
a
group,
focus group,
invitando a todos a quienes participaban
inviting
en posición de
everyone
editoras
who was
para entender cuáles eran sus
an
necesidades,
editor
y surgieron
to know
cosas que a
what
veces
their
no nos
needs were,
imaginábamos.
and
Por
things that
supuesto, la
we weren't
tecnología era
even
algo
thinking
seguro,
about came up, and technology was a
ahí está,
certainty.
bueno, a ver si se
So
escucha.
there, maybe you can hear it right now.
No se escucha, pero pueden ver
Cannot hear it, but you can see the transcript. Unfortunately, I don't know what's happening.
ahí pueden ver el equipo técnico y el
There you can see the
equipo,
technical
perdón, no se vio
team.
el equipo del área de sistemas
We could not see
que
the
estuvieron en la
systems
última parte.
area on the
La
last
idea era
portion.
mostrar que
So the
esto,
idea was
como
to
bien dijeron
show
las
that,
colegas anteriores, es un trabajo
as
en
some
equipo
other
porque
colleagues
surgió de las
have mentioned,
necesidades
this came
concretas
from
de
the
nuestra
needs from our community, and where that is our job, and to try to identify those needs all the time. And although it's difficult to respond, we created a community, and our job has to do with understanding that we're all people that undergo different processes and we're immersed in a context, and to try to support each other. So we put together meetings where journals that are already advanced in their professionalization, they receive questions, and they tell about their experience for all of us. For example, we're in a WhatsApp group in campus, and let's see, how did they go about to include themselves in DOA, or to help each other and to try to solve issues that somewhat the journals were kind of isolated, everything supported by the university. The journals that are under a basic label of scientific journals, they have to be compliant about data availability, and we offer the authors, the article authors, regardless of whether they're part of the university, we give them our repository and data regulation, and also we market and promote what's being done. And yes, the university, up until this moment that we're working, this starting in 2018, and the portal was created in 20, launched or published in 2020. So we have been able to pay the anti-forger software, the DOI, that make those journals as professional as possible. That it's so complicated right now because there's a lot of concern, as Lucia was saying, about AI, and one of the things that have to do with sustainability is that we have not been able to pay to the people that have our own editing role, as Costa Rica is actually doing, which is something that I highlight greatly because that'll make our job so much easier, because they end up being very small teams, and that's a challenge to bring in new generations in what has to do with journal editing. So that is a challenge, and also something that I highlight from what Lucia was saying, that we're just writing internally these policies about what do we do with the journals that are not responding to the needs. So we have an admission policy, but we don't have a discontinuity policy. So we don't know if that was evident on the video, but each journal has their JX. It's not a general portal. Each journal has its own OJS, or we have also been hacked, for example, last week or the week before. So maintenance, infrastructure maintenance is extremely important, so that each journal has an updated and most stable version of JS, and that makes that if there's an editorial discontinuity, then we have a discharge policy that says, okay, we will maintain this up until this moment, because it's very difficult, and to avoid the proliferation of journals, because everybody likes to be editor and have that role, but then to sustain this, it's difficult, and that is something we try to transmit. So we're working also with our team about this, about sustainability. So we know that the journals that we're going to remove is going to the university repository. It doesn't disappear, the content. So I see a lot of similarities on how these journals show up and how are they maintained throughout Latin America. And I love to share our experiences, and hopefully we can work together and exchange even more. I will write down all the policies that everyone mentioned before, to introduce them as a discussion in my institution and in the Argentina as a country, because it's the same, because I have to be as an advisor for the group for the capacity strengthening, which is the organization like the one in Brazil for the strengthening of the journals, of the scientific journals in Argentina. And we see that the problems are similar. Open, non-commercial open access is the one that predominates dominates.
Argentina, que
There
son,
should
que
be a
tienen
couple
alguna
of
PC, pero
journals
muy,
that
muy
should
pequeñas,
have
como
certain
decía
PCs, very
Arianna en
small
algún
PCs.
momento,
Ariana
algo
was
que
saying
permite
before,
sostenerse porque son
something that enables
sociedades,
them
no,
to
no
you
son
know,
universidades, pero
maintain
las grandes
themselves.
universidades
But those who are
evidentemente
from
están
universities,
sostenidas por
definitely they
la
are
institución
supported by the
y les
institution,
cuesta,
and
pero
it's
seguimos
difficult.
apostando a esto porque es
And
algo
we
en lo que
continue to
nacimos.
bet on this because that's how
No
we
es
were
algo,
born.
es algo
It's not,
natural y es algo
this is a
que
natural thing. It's something that we
aunque
feel
vemos
it's
que en otras regiones
transparent, although we see
algo que
that
se está
in
discutiendo,
our
entonces,
regions is something
¿cómo
that's being
hacemos para
discussed.
sostenerlo?
So,
Pero aquí
how do we sustain
es
this?
abierto, pero no
It's
es
not
gratis.
free.
Entonces,
It's open, but it's not free.
aprender de otros modelos
So,
es
and
muy
it's free,
importante.
but it's not free. So, to learn from others is important.
Y
Thank
bueno,
you
voy a
so
dejar el
much.
enlace al portal y los
So,
correos
I
para que
will
todos
leave
accedamos.
access
Muchísimas gracias,
to the
Paula, y
portal.
totalmente de acuerdo
Thank you,
contigo. Y
Paula,
creo
and
que esto
completely
el
agree with
trabajo que
you
muestras y el trabajo
with
que están
this.
haciendo ustedes
Now
es
that you show all
justamente
of this,
la muestra de
and
este
that
otro
is
potencial que
precisely
tenemos
that
en América
conductive thread
Latina.
that we
Nosotros
have in Latin
compartimos
America,
muchas necesidades y
where we
muchos
share
retos,
a
por
lot of
supuesto,
needs and
pero también
challenges, of course,
compartimos ese
but also we
espíritu de
share that
siempre
spirit
hacer comunidad,
that
¿no? Y
to
ayudarnos,
create
siempre el poder
community and to help each
compartir las
others
experiencias. Y eso es algo
between
que viene mucho
editors,
de la región
and that's something
latinoamericana, ¿no?
endemic of the Latin America
Que a veces
region
es difícil
that sometimes is
expresar
difficult to
o
express
reflejar o
or to
cuantificar, pero a
reflect
veces
on or
a mí
quantify,
me
because
interesa mucho la
sometimes I
pregunta
get
que
asked a lot when
desde
we
la
are
línea desde Europa que
presenting the
hicimos
Latin
en
American
Murillo,
model. Yeah, but
aquellos
how do you
datos,
measure
aquellos
this, and
procesos
how much is this?
es
How do you
visible,
measure
¿no?
these
Y
indicators?
esta parte de hacer
And how do you
comunidad
make this
que
visible? So
implica en
making this
términos
community and what it means
socializar problemas, de
with
buscar
socializing
siempre
challenges and
soluciones
collectively
para el
looking
bien
for
común,
answers
es
for the
justamente este
common good,
paradigma de los comunes
it's
llevado a la
part of a
práctica que muchas
paradigm
veces es muy difícil
that
cuantificar,
it's
¿no?
sometimes
No es
difficult
una
to
cuota
quantify. It's not a
as de un
quota
PC, ¿no?
as like
Pero es
easily
un
like a
valor,
PC, but
quiero decir,
it
es un
has
valor que
value.
como tal añadido,
It's an
pues
added
sin
value that
costos,
it
estamos
has,
todo el
and
tiempo,
it
estamos
entails certain
como
costs.
académicos
Our
y
time
esta
as
comunidad y
academics
trabajando
and this
en
community
comunidad va
working
sosteniendo
collectively
precisamente
generating
a las revistas. Y esto creo que es algo
the
que
journals.
compartimos
So this is something that we
definitivamente
share in the
orgullosamente
Latin
y es
American
lo que
region
distingue al modelo,
proudly, and
¿no?
that's something that
Y creo
distinguishes the
que en
model as
ese
such.
sentido, y si me
So
permite
under that
citar
sense, I would
ahora
like to introduce now
para
to
cerrar y
Irina
poder
to
aprovechar
wrap
nuestro
up
día de hoy,
our discussion
Irina
on a
Kuchman,
high
que
note. Irina
seguramente
Kuchman,
pues vamos a
who
encontrar ese hilo conductor
we
también
might find that
con África, ¿no? Irina ha
common
trabajado mucho
thread
con
even with
revistas
Africa.
de
She has
acceso
worked a lot
abierto,
with open
NUFI,
access
no
journals,
APC,
no
en África
non-APC in
y
Africa.
yo estoy segura que
And
encontraremos también
I
estas
know that
cuestiones
we
comunes tanto en
have these
retos,
common
necesidades, pero también
challenges,
en ese
needs,
espíritu
and also on
cultural y de
that
tradición de
cultural
compartir
spirit and the
que
tradition
también en nuestros
of
hermanos en
sharing
África.
that
Entonces,
our brothers and
Irina,
sisters in Africa
adelante,
have.
muchísimas
Irina,
gracias
the
por
floor is
acompañarnos
yours.
también el
Thank you
día de
so
hoy.
much for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for inviting me, and I'm learning a lot, and I see many, many, many similarities between what you are discussing and what we're discussing in Africa. And I also see that many solutions that you just presented would also work in Africa. So thank you so much. I'm very grateful. I'm speaking on behalf of community of practice for no-fee open access publishing in Africa that includes almost 400 journal editors, editors of no-fee open access journals, and also librarians who are supporting those journals in their institutions. And the word community was already mentioned a number of times today, and I would like to stress that journals are also communities. And this is an example of a journal of student affairs in African research. And it doesn't only publish journal articles, it also serves as a platform that supports multimedia knowledge dissemination. They run capacity development, professional events. They co-produce research results together. So it's a real platform across institutions and even across countries. And the challenge is how such communities are supported. So in this case, it's a collaboration of a number of universities in South Africa and committed journal editors who unfortunately also work voluntary in many cases. As no fee open access publishing community, we are now designing a document for institutional leaders, maybe also national policymakers, but we have better access to institutional leaders, so we are addressing them first. And we call it a policy brief on no fee open access publishing, and it includes an overview of this model. It also explains what are the challenges for African institutions and journals with predominantly commercial approaches to open access publishing. We're making a case for more equitable and inclusive publishing with no fee model. We also highlight political support that has already been provided to this model on the global level and also in some African countries. For example, Uganda, Cote d'Ivoire, national policies mention no fee open access publishing. And then we make a case for collective responsibility and collaboration, how institutions and governments could collaborate to support this model institutionally and also on the continent. We also highlight why we believe no fee open access journals should be supported because they're really strategic assets. As it was already mentioned today, they provide a publication venue for local research where locally relevant topics are really valued and not marginalized. They are reputable and socially responsible, and they also preserve cultural heritage. In many cases, they are published in local languages as well. So that document includes even a longer section why these journals are important. And then we provide a set of actions that an institution could take to support these journals. For example, organize activities to raise awareness and promote the benefits of publishing in no fee open access journals, how institutions could enhance recognition, rewards, incentives, like it was presented today, make sure that editorial role is a part of job description. They are promoted for that. Thanks a lot for sharing your experiences on that. Also how institutions could actually support these journals and could collaborate within the country between institutions and also with the governments, how multi-year funding mechanisms could be provided, and what kind of collaborative funding initiatives are there. And all these actions include specific examples, how institutions are already supporting those journals. And this document also ends with a list of models that are used now by no-fee journals to sustain their operations. And as you see, there are quite a number of them. And unfortunately, many journals have to use more than one elements listed here. And some journals have over a dozen models they use to generate funding to secure their operations. And also in the list of those models, we also provide examples how exactly it's done. And then as a community, we also had discussions about quality. What do you mean by quality in Diamond Open Access Publishing? And that's a document that we released earlier this year and just updated and released the second version. And would like to thank everyone who is a member of our community, and we'll be happy to answer questions and would love to collaborate because I think we are discussing similar topics and there are a lot of areas where we can strengthen each other's work. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Irina. Definitivamente que compartimos
Thank you,
retos.
Irina. We definitely share challenges, but also values around what we think that it's open access. Now, I would like to give the floor to our
si
panelists.
quieren responder a alguna
Maybe
de
if
las
you want to
preguntas
answer to some of the
en el chat,
questions that
si nos
have
funcionara
been
el
going
escritorio o
on
alguna
the
que les
chat,
parezca que es
maybe something that you
importante
feel it's
comentar. Sé
important
que muchas ya se han
to
respondido
address.
y
I know
también
that
invitamos
many
a
of
los que
them
quisieran
have been
participar
answered, and we
en la
also
caja
would
de
like
Q&A para
to
si tienen
have the
preguntas
audience use the
adicionales.
Q&A
Yo
box
tengo
for
una
additional
pregunta, pero
questions. I
quisiera
have a
dejar un
question,
poquito para más
but maybe I will
adelante,
leave that for
también
later on,
una
and
propuesta que
also a
queremos compartir
proposition or proposal that we
desde
want to
BOAI,
share from the
pero bueno, primero
BOAI,
vamos a
but
permitir
we
que
will
nuestras panelistas
allow
hagan
our
algunas de las
panelists
preguntas
to
que quieran. ¿Alguna le
answer
gustaría
some of the
responder a
questions
alguna
that are on the
en
chat
vivo?
box. Would you like to answer any of them live?
Adelante, Silvia, muchas gracias.
Yes, Silvia, go ahead.
Muchas gracias. Sí, creo que
Thank
se
you.
logró
Yes,
expresar
I
las
think
preguntas
that I
que
managed to
estaban sobre la
answer
Universidad Nacional.
most of the questions for
Me
the
gustaría
National
resaltar
University, but I would like to
que no
highlight that
tenemos
right now
acceso a
we don't
externos
have
para el
external
sistema que le
access to
mencionaba
external
que se
parties
menciona
for the system that I was mentioning, where
que hemos
you
ofrecido otras iniciativas,
where the
pero
magazine and other
como
initiatives
muchas
are
veces si nos
happening.
contactan
But
podemos
if
generar,
you
digamos,
reach
más
out to us,
paneles
we can have
sobre
meetings
los
to
sistemas.
explain about those systems.
Todos queremos saber sobre su
We all want
experiencia
to know
porque
about your
sería
experience
un
because
gran
definitely
referente para
it's a
nuestras
great reference
instituciones.
for our
Sobre el tema de
institutions
apoyar de políticas y apoyar de
uh,
financiamiento,
to
pues
talk
es
about
justo lo que
funding and
nos garantiza
policies.
la
That's precisely
sostenibilidad
what
y el
guarantees us
crecimiento y
sustainability
la calidad
and making more
y sobre todo el
professional in the
mantenernos
quality and also
como revistas no
maintaining
comerciales. Entonces, un
ourselves
gran
as
esfuerzo, Lucia, y creo que
non-commercial
podemos
journals.
destacar
So
ese
I
gran
will want
ejemplo
to boast about
y
this
gran
because it's a
referente.
great example.
¿Alguien más?
Anyone else?
Sí, creo que hay una pregunta
I think there
de
was another
Felipe
question from Phoebe
sobre la adecuación de las
about
revistas
the adequation of
en
the
estos criterios,
journals
¿no? Bueno,
under these
vamos a
criteria.
trabajar juntos con los
We're
editores
going to work
porque la
together with the
implementación
editors
de las
because the
directrices van a
implementing
empezar.
of the
Entonces, fueron aprobadas ahora a inicio de
they were
octubre
just
la
approved
actualización
in
y
October, the
tenemos un plan de
updating,
empezar con esto en próximo año.
and we want
Y para
to,
ajustar ellas,
we have a plan to
tardará
start
algo como
on
2
this
años.
soon. So it'll take about 2 years
Y será
minimum.
un trabajo
So it
de
would be
equipo
a
técnico de
team
portal
effort,
y juntamente con las
technical
revistas.
portal team, and together with the journals.
Muchas gracias, Lucia.
Thank you,
Hay una pregunta
Lucia.
que quizá...
There's a
adelante,
question.
Bárbara. Adelante.
Barbara, go ahead.
Creo que estaba Andrea
I
también,
think that Andrea,
participó. Creo que es
but
más bien
if I may,
pregunta. Hay gente que dice, no es una pregunta, es una
there's people that's
reflexión.
not,
Algo que
it's not a
puedo
question, it's a
entender
reflection.
también como
Something that I
una,
was able to see
algo que entre
as
todas las presentaciones,
something that
muchas gracias a
was
todas,
across the
porque yo
whole set of
después de la
presentations
declaración trabajé
because
con
from the
Rector
declaration
el
we
año pasado,
work with the
trabajé con ellos
magazines and
entonces
the journals, and so I also worked
de
with the journals
verdad,
on my background. So
pasándonos quizás la pregunta al revés, ¿no? Porque
asking
BOAI
backwards,
también se trata sobre
BOAI is also
también
about
mostrar este modelo y
showing these
desde,
models.
desde
It's
Europa, ¿verdad? Porque
how
hemos estado
from
viendo que
Europe and
como
other regions are you seeing that
la
this
calidad de
model is
contenido se ha
possible?
repetido
And
en
the word
todas las
community
presentaciones.
was
No quiero sonar quizás
coincided in the whole presentations. I don't want to
demasiado, también hay un punto
sound
muy
all
científico detrás,
inspiring and
pero
removing the
sí
scientific
quisiera saber en
background.
qué puede
But if we
trabajar,
definitely want
a
to
veces no
tackle
con un
these
financiamiento que uno
jobs,
quisiera,
not with the whole
la
kind of
estructura
funding that we
comunitaria es
wanted,
importante.
but the community sense is
Entonces,
extremely
como
important.
que Paola
So
decía, todo
as
teniendo
Paola
nosotros
was
énfasis
saying,
en
then
ese
she
equipo humano
emphasized
detrás de todo.
that there's people
Creo que en un
behind the
modelo
work.
muy
So
comercial eso desaparece.
with a
Toda
commercial model that
el protagonismo
it's
de la
taking off
comunidad
the
y también de
equation,
la
so
organización
that
venezolana es
community
una
and the
iniciativa
Barcelona
iniciada por la comunidad, puede ser
Declaration,
algo más
it's
lento,
a
puede ser
community-led
necesario que
initiative.
tengamos
Yes, it's
resultados
slower and
inmediatos,
we
pero
may
yo
not
esa
have immediate
inmediatez
results,
la
but the
veo como
motivation,
algo
I
muy
see
importante
this
en este modelo.
as something
Ya,
very important
esperemos,
under
pero
this model. I'm
quería
inspired, I'm
tomar
sorry,
ese
but I wanted
desafío
just to
como
reflect on
primer
that
paso.
and to share it with you.
Totalmente de acuerdo, Bárbara. Yo estoy
Totally
totalmente de
agree.
acuerdo.
And
Y
I
de hecho hay una
completely
pregunta de
agree. And
Marcelo
there is a
Barraza que
question
quizá
from
también quiero
Marcelo
poner aquí en la
Barraza that I
mesa
would
para
like
quien
to
quiera
put on the
quien
floor
quiera responder.
that
Marcelo
wants
nos
to
dice,
answer.
¿podemos
Marcelo is
utilizar
saying,
solo
yes,
la
so we
palabra
continue to
diamante?
use the word
Si fuera así,
diamond.
¿cómo
If
manifestarlo en
so,
nuestra
how do
revista?
we
No se ha
manifest
abordado, pero
this
¿qué
in our
tipo de
journals? It
licencia
hasn't been
técnico sería
discussed,
ideal para
but what kind
compaginar
of
con esta categoría
license
de
will
acceso abierto
be
diamante?
fitting to
Y por
that
ahí
diamond
abajo,
open access
Eduardo nos recordó
license? So Eduardo also
el
reminded
Mexicaxo,
us that
Redalyc y VICT lanzaron la
the
declaración en
Latinx
México
Claxo
para
and
proporcionar
Redalyc,
una licencia
they launched
CC BY no
a
comercial SDA.
declaration for
Eso
a
en cuanto a
CC
licenciamiento.
by
Y para el tema de
non-commercial
licenciamiento,
license. So we have the issue about licensing and also the nomenclature. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yo creo que seguimos
I think that we
adoptando una
continue to
nomenclatura que
adopt
viene de afuera
nomenclature that
y
it's
nosotros, bueno,
external to us,
en un momento nos
and
encontramos con esto
we
de, bueno, ahora las tenemos
find
que llamar
ourselves
de
like,
otra
okay,
manera porque
well, we
eso
have
que
to
era
label them
natural
or call them
fue
differently because
absorbido,
that naturality was
el
absorbed.
dorado, como
The
decías,
golden, like you were saying,
tampoco nos resuena a nada lo que es diamante,
it
como
doesn't
decías, en
resonate. The
Argentina.
diamond one in
El tema es cómo
Argentina,
se
the
van
issue is
conformando,
how
cómo se van
everything starts to
adaptando estas
settle
palabras. Y
and
va a ser
how do
difícil
we
cambiarlas,
take on these
porque de
words,
la
and it's very
manera de hablar
difficult to change them on
hablamos
the
de la
way
comunidad de acceso
to
abierto y
talk,
ciencia
especially in the
abierta.
open
Yo creo que
access
las
community,
revistas
on
y los
open science
editores
community.
no
The
tienen
journals
mucha
and the
idea de qué
editors don't have an
significa
idea
ser,
whether they're
ser,
diamond, gold, and
no
whatever.
tienen idea.
They
Nosotros
don't
les
know.
transmitimos estos
We are
conceptos y también
conveying these
podemos dar
concepts and
vuelta a
we
esto. No creo
can
que
turn
sea
around and
difícil,
shift. I
porque
don't
es
think
su
it's
manera
so
de
difficult
trabajo.
because it's
No,
their
no creo que
way
sea
of
difícil de
working.
cambiar,
It's
pero
not
sí,
difficult to
sí tiene
change. But
connotaciones
if it
cambiantes
has
para una
such a
comunidad
nasty
hispanohablante del sur global,
implications and connotation
deberíamos
for
hacer un
this
esfuerzo
southern part of the
y
globe,
cambiarlo.
we should make an effort and change this.
A favor totalmente, Paula, y a favor. Es muy difícil
Forward,
moderar,
yes,
tratar de
it's
ser
difficult to
neutral
moderate
con
and try to
cosas
be,
tan...
uh,
Por eso
and try to be
me gusta
neutral
moderar
with such clear positions.
la
That's why I don't like
conversación,
to
pero
moderate because I end
de
up
acuerdo,
influencing the
de acuerdo
conversation.
con
I totally agree,
Bianca Amaro,
and I
que
agree with
decía que
Bianca
sí, sí va,
Amaro,
y
who says yes, yes,
aquí sí,
yes.
yo también coincido totalmente. ¿Alguien más
CCBY
quiere
and CSA.
compartir su
Does
posición
anyone
respecto
else
de
want to
ambos,
share their
de
position
ambas preguntas?
or standpoint? Any more questions?
No, creo que entonces todos coincidimos,
No?
todas
I think we
coincidimos.
can all agree.
Además, paréntesis, hago un paréntesis,
As
todas
a
son mujeres, y ya
parenthesis,
veo que
we are
comparten su
all women.
mayoría
This was
de
not
género,
intentional,
pues
but we
creo que eso también
coincided,
habla de
and
que
I think that
estamos
speaks
ante una
to,
discusión
as we said
hay
before,
muchas, somos muchas mujeres
that there are so many
en
women
ciencia abierta y
on
democracia
the open
abierta,
science
entonces
spectrum.
pues también eso eh, algo de significar quizá, ¿no?
It should
Lucy,
be
adelante.
meaningful somewhat.
Queria ser uma pergunta, porque já que estamos em diferentes países, não?
Since we're in different
Como é
countries,
esse
I want to
tema
ask
de
a question.
inclusão
What's the
de
um,
revistas em revistas
how's
no
the
tema del funding?
topic of
Porque a
investment
Bárbara
or
veio da
funding on
Universidad de
journals?
Brasil,
Because Barbara brought the
por exemplo, não
Chilean
existe,
situation, but here in
não há
Brazil,
muitas
for example,
instituições
there's not much
para portais de
investment
revistas. Esse
for
tema
journal
já é elevado
portals,
a
and
CAPES, por
that
exemplo, a IPIPSI,
issue
assim também
has arrived to CAPS, for
CSUCA
example.
como
There's a
BOAI,
couple of, let's say,
pero
7 or 8 years ago,
nada cambia. Então,
but
se
nothing
você
has
tiver alguma
changed.
experiência para
So
compartilhar,
you have any kind
para
of
dar
experience
alguma
to
esperança a nós
share
outros,
and to
talvez
give us some hope? What can you say?
Pues en lo que se inspira alguna de las panelistas,
So while the
qué bueno que
panelists
preguntas,
gets
Paula, pues es una
inspired, I
excelente
think it's
inicial
extremely
porque
important that you
efectivamente,
ask,
de hecho,
because
mi pregunta
effectively my
y en
question
relación, yo
it's
quiero que
related
nos
to
acompañe,
this. I wanted to
porque
ask
los
you
esfuerzos que
what's your
vemos aquí
perspective,
son
because the
tanto en
efforts that we see
revistas
here
como
are
también
for
en las
journals
universidades,
and also universities, that it's quite
seamos, o sea,
a task.
muchísimo esfuerzo
It's
que desde el
a lot of
internacional estamos
effort as
viendo
an
propuestas
institution that
como
we're seeing
modelos de
proposals
universidad
as
hacia el acceso
models
abierto.
of universities
Más bien,
towards
mi
open
pregunta
access.
es,
So my
¿qué
question is, what
visualizas
kind of
desde
challenges do you
términos
visualize
de
for
integración
these challenge
uniendo
for these
hacia una
models
escala
of
nacional? Porque creo
institutions
que estamos
are
justo
looking
en
towards a
ese
national
esquema
scale?
en donde
I think
los
that we're right now on
protocolos, en
that
donde las
standpoint where the
instituciones no es
models,
este individual, no son
we see
esfuerzos
each other
individuales
very
de muchas
institutionally,
personas,
even
¿no?
sometimes
Que dedican
individually.
ahí el tiempo,
These are
pero no a
superhuman
nivel
efforts by
nacional.
many
Yo ahí les
people
comparto
that leave their
en,
time and such, but
en
not on a
México se están
national
haciendo
level.
cosas muy
I can share that
interesantes.
in
De hecho,
Mexico, we are doing very
estamos
interesting
siendo
things.
parte
So
del
proudly,
grupo
we're being part
técnico
of
asesor
the technical advisory group of
nacional,
the
que
national
también incluye esta
policy
palabra
that also
soberana o la
includes
soberanía, porque cuando
this
hablamos de
sovereign
revistas
because when we talk about infrastructure, journals as infrastructure, national infrastructure of an institution, also it allows us to have certain independence. So when you talk about knowledge sovereignty and digital sovereignty, it's important or interesting when we talk about it with open access. So in Mexico, that's happening. We're in the process. I think there are very good things that are going to come out of that. So how do you visualize moving that university model to a national scale? How do you see that in your countries? What I can say is that it works as more informal networks. There's CAICIT here, but we don't have a funding. Funding for journals was about to happen eventually, and because of political changes, it dropped. So there is a network of portals that it's not formalized on the inter-university council, but there's the Red Sara or there's the CAICIP who also supports. So we support each other mutually because of this community. As we were saying before, we have a phone call to access, but state funding as Chile or other countries have, we don't have that, and that will be something important. But it is being discussed amongst the evaluating commissions. It's very interesting that in Argentina, the CONI said the investigation council, they're talking about how to strengthen quality journals so that within their evaluation, I think it's important to strengthen the journals. It's important to focus on the evaluation models and to assign to everything open and those efforts the same importance of being in other traditional indexes. So this evaluation topic, it's being considered as criteria and it's being talked about in the evaluation committees. And I think that's going to bring good results. There are countries or institutions that have joined. We in Argentina, we haven't, but in Chile they have. So I think everything will bring traction towards funding and sustainability. And how do we evaluate and how do we put the eggs on the basket that we want it? Where are we going to put our efforts moving forward? So the voices of the business, we're trying to get the ball rolling and moving on to Latin America as well. Thank you, Paula, for sharing your Argentinian perspective. We have 5 minutes of our sessions. We have a lot of questions. There's a very rich topic and there are a lot of questions in the chat. So I would really ask the panelists to try to answer as much as possible, but we have also shared the contact information so that we can continue this discussion virtually because there's so much to talk about. I don't know if someone wants to share one last comment before my last comment and giving the floor to Melissa. I would like to talk about the investment. It would be important to have investment towards journal portals because all infrastructure it's offered because it's just an implementation of OJS. It's necessary a whole technological support of products and services. So if the editor, as designed there, the editor needs to be more in charge of the editorial flow, why not giving resources and tools for the journal team so that they can handle that and to leave the editor focus on their job, that it's to qualify the scientific article. So the idea here for Brazil would be to talk to a rector network of all the universities. So I would like to get involved under their request so that they maybe can talk to Syntaking Caps so that the inscription for next year or maybe 2 years it is also added to the journal portals and Because if the infrastructure, the investment is structural, why do the journals need the money? So in the end, if they have everything, I'm not going to need to manage all of that. So that's my standpoint.
Totalmente de
Thank you,
acuerdo.
Lucy. I totally agree.
Bueno, pues si les parece bien,
So
empecemos
if
entonces
you
a cerrar
agree,
estos
we'll start our
nos
closing
encantaría
remarks.
cerrar
We had the idea to
una
wrap up with
propuesta. Nosotros
a
en BOAI hemos
proposal.
platicado
Here
mucho
in
esta idea también
BOAI, we
pues,
have discussed this
vistas de la
idea that we have
experiencia en
seen from
particular
the
de
experience, in
Rica,
particular from
de
the
cómo
Redalyc,
todos estos esfuerzos que
America,
hemos hecho
that all of
por
these
parte de la
efforts
comunidad editora, de
from
las
the editing
revistas, de las
community, the
instituciones,
journals, the
por todos los equipos que
institutions,
están detrás de
and
la
all the teams that are
sostenibilidad
behind the
de las revistas como
sustainability of
bienes
the journals
públicos,
as
esa
public
actividad no se
assets,
reconoce,
all
esa
that activity
actividad
is
no
not
forma
acknowledged, is
parte
not
de
part
esta
of
mal pensada
this
industria de prestigio
poorly
académico en
constructed industry of
investigación.
academic
Ya lo han
prestige
mencionado en
on
los sistemas de
research.
evaluación
You
y
have
diseños
mentioned
políticos.
this in
Todo este
evaluation
esfuerzo
systems and
pareciera ser
policies.
casi
All these
heroico, no
efforts
reconocido, ya
look
casi
almost
alzado al podio
heroic,
retribuido
but
económicamente,
unacknowledged,
pero tampoco
not
reconocido.
even
Entonces, lo que hemos
economically
hablado en
retributed.
BOAI
So
es esta
what we have
necesidad
discussed from
de poder
BOAI, it's this
visibilizar
need
todas estas
to make
contribuciones
visible
de
all these
nosotros, los
contributions
docentes,
from
profesionales y
us, our
ustedes,
teams, our
para
universities,
sostener estas
to
revistas como bienes
sustain
públicos.
these
Tiene que haber
journals as
algo,
public assets.
una
There have to
plataforma,
be
recursos que nos
something, a
permitan hacer
platform,
visible
a
la contribución que
resource that
damos, no
allows
solamente a
us to
nuestra
make this
revista para que
contribution
se vea,
visible,
sino
not
al
only
mundo, porque nuestras
for our
revistas, como
journals,
bien lo
but to
mencionamos
keep
el día
them
de
and
hoy,
maintain them, but
son
to the world,
comunidades y
because
dan
as you can
servicio
see,
a una
these are
comunidad autora
communities and they
investigadora
give
de
a
muchos otros
service to an
países, no solamente los
author
autores de
community,
contribuciones que son
research
de nuestras
community, not just from
instituciones o de
our
nuestros países,
institutions or our
sino como
countries,
precisamente
but as
de estos que
precisely
construyen comunidad,
vehicles
que
that
dan
build
servicio a
communities
muchos
and
otros
they
países, y eso
give
tendría que
services
ser
to other
reconocido
countries as
de
well.
manera que sea
And this should
reconocido
be
y sea
acknowledged
visible, pues
in a
podemos
way that
buscar
and as it is
instrumentos,
acknowledged,
medios y
we
buscar
can
también
look for the necessary
parte
funding
de la
and
evaluación
to
de los
have them be
sistemas de
part of
evaluación
the
científica.
systems
Entonces,
of
algo nos hace
scientific
falta para
evaluation. So
transparentar, para
we
premiar, para
need
que se
something
vuelva
else to make more
prestigio con
transparent,
base
to
en la
award,
sostenibilidad de
and
revistas
so
y de
that it
bienes públicos.
becomes
Entonces, queremos
the
empezar
journals
con
and
Rectors de BOAI
sustainability as public
para
assets
que se conviertan
happen.
esto en un
So we want
recurso
to
en
start a
Internet que nos permita
project
hacer
to
visible lo
have
que todos
this
estamos
become
haciendo a
an
favor del
internet
bien común y
resource to
que
make
y el
this
bien público,
visible
no
and
solamente
to
ver
make this in
monitores de
favor of
APC,
public
monitores de
assets and public
citación, bases de datos
goods,
de
not
citas,
just
catedráticos de
APC
conferencias,
monitors or citation
rankings de
monitors and
excelencia,
databases
universidades que
or
miden
excellence
cosas que a
rankings
veces
that
ni siquiera
measure
sabemos
things
si
that are,
estamos
we
o
don't
no
even know what they're
considerando,
measuring, what are
sino
black
más bien
boxes.
hacer
But
visible
to make
si nos tuviéramos que
visible,
medir hay que
and if we
medirnos
had to measure, we
sosteniblemente
have to measure
internacionalmente.
ourselves for
Entonces, queremos
keeping
empezar
public assets or public goods.
en
So we
colaboración
have to
con BOAI
create
desde
a
BOAI
project
y pues
from
para eso
BOAI, and for
Melissa
this,
también estuvo aquí para podernos
Melissa
apoyar la podemos invitar
had the idea to
y
invite
hacerles
you
extensiva esta invitación
and
a través de un
to
enlace con un
ask you
formulario en donde quien
to link
quisiera
on
pues
this
ser parte de este
page
grupo
and
de
a
trabajo
QR
para
to be
comenzar
part of this workforce
a
to
llevar a la
start
realidad esta
to
idea, pues se
carry
inscriban en
this
nuestro grupo.
idea,
Por supuesto, la
this
invitación
project
es
to reality.
completamente
Of
abierta.
course, the
Podemos establecer
invitation is
desde un grupo de
completely
trabajo que
open
podamos
so that we
reunirnos
can create a task
periódicamente, que
force
busquemos
that can meet
recursos, que podamos
periodically, that
construir
we look for
algo que se permita
resources
hacer
and we can
visible
build
toda esta
something that makes
contribución desde
all
nuestras
this
universidades y
contribution
desde nuestros
visible
países.
from
Bueno,
our
voy a hacer el enlace
institutions and
QR,
our
lo
countries.
compartimos y
Here's the
bueno, ya si
QR
cerramos
link,
aquí, le paso la
and we
palabra a
share this
Melissa
to you. We
para que
wrap
nos
up
haga
here,
favor
and I
de
give the
cerrar
floor to
oficialmente.
Melissa so
Bueno, y
she can
agradeciendo a todos
give the
por
closing
la
remarks for this
participación.
webinar. And I thank
Tuvimos
all of you for your
llegamos hasta casi
participation.
140
We had
participantes,
almost
de verdad
140
reitero,
participants
muchísimas
that
gracias por
were
su
with us
tiempo, a
for an
nuestros
hour and a half.
panelistas,
And
por
thank you so much
supuesto,
for
a
sharing with
Andrea y
us
a todos los
and
que
our
también
panelists and
han
Andrea and
hecho
every part of the team that
este
made
tipo de
this
trabajo tan
webinar
lindo.
possible. It's also
Adelante,
for the
Melissa, por
interpretation
favor.
team. Go ahead, Melissa.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arianna, for moderating this webinar, and huge thanks to our fabulous speakers, as well as our interpreters, and a special thanks to all of the participants for all of your questions and your participation in the workshop. And Andrea has also posted a link to this form that's in the Q&A as well. So if anyone is interested in joining a working group to develop such a resource as Arianna described, we invite you to share your contact details with us and we'll follow up. So thank you again, and happy Open Access Week to everyone.